to Shakyamuni Buddha. Tempa Chendende Dejin Shepa Drachampa Yandapa Tsope Sanje Ripa Dang Shabsu Tempa Dewa Shepa Jitin Champa Chebu Doe Kalo Jua Lana Mepa Ladang Minamchi Tempa Sanje Chendende Peljawa Shakya Tupala Shasalo Churu Chapsu Chiwo. Teacher, Bhagawan, Tathagata, Arhant, perfectly pure and complete Buddha, all-knowing, having poise, Sugata, apprehender of the world, navigator of beings to be subdued, incomparable, teacher of gods and humans. To the Buddha, the Bhagawan, the glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, we prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. Refuge and bodhicitta prayer. Sangyecho dang tso chi cho nam la jang cho ba du danye chab so chi Dage jin so ji pe so nam ji do la pen shi sangye dro pa sho. To the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. To the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. A short mandala offering. O Saji Pochi Juxing Me To Trang Re Rab Leng Jin Yere Chen Pare Sangye Shing Do Meng De O Ji Droken Nam Da Jing La Chu Pa Sho. This ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, adorned with sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered thus, may all beings enjoy such pure lands. The 7-limbed prayer. I prostrate my 3 doors with a mind of respect and offer all actually arranged and mentally emanated offerings. I reveal all the downfalls and negativities that I have ever collected and rejoice in the virtues of individuals and superiors. Please remain perfectly abiding until samsara is no longer seen. I request you to turn the vast and profound wheels of Dharma. I dedicate the virtues of myself and others to the great enlightenment. The prayer of the lineage of gurus, which this week we'll do just in English. Body born from a million magnificent, excellent virtues, speech fulfilling the hopes of infinite beings, a mind that sees all objects of knowledge precisely, I bow my head to the chief among the Shakyas. Supreme sons of the incomparable teacher, carrying the load of all the conqueror's deeds by their emanations appearing in countless realms, I prostrate to Maitreya and Manjushri. The mother of conquerors is difficult to fathom. The precise thought is in commentaries written by Jambuvipa's ornaments Nagarjuna and Asanga. I prostrate at the feet of those most renowned in the three realms. From these two great chariots come the excellent lineages of the paths of profound view and vast deeds, their essential points gathered thoroughly and without fault, prostration to the lamp holding this treasury of instruction, giving explanation through compassion by seeing precisely and completely the essential points of all paths of Sutra and Tantra, holder of the Conqueror's entire holy Dharma, prostrations to the glorious Losang Drogpa. I, seeing all the infinite teachings, supreme way of crossing for those entering the journey's liberation, moved by compassion to deeds skilled in method, prostrations to the spiritual masters who make everything clear, and the great treasury of excellence, the prayer of the path to enlightenment, begin in English. The kind master is the basis of all qualities, and proper reliance is the root of the path. By seeing this excellence and through much striving, bestow blessings to be devoted with great respect. This gentle support of freedom, obtained this one time, is most difficult to achieve. Knowing its great value gives rise to a mind seizing its essence constantly, day and night. Bestow blessings to generate this continuum unceasingly. It is like a bubble in water, this constantly moving body and life. Thus remember the swift collapse of death. Beyond death, like body and shadow, white and black karmic results follow after. By gaining firm certainty in this, the massive faults, subtle and very subtle, are abandoned, and the accomplishment of all virtuous collections completed. Bestow blessings to ever retain conscientiousness. The qualities of samsara are unfit to be trusted. The door to all suffering, do not be content with these enjoyments. By knowing its defects, bestow blessings to develop a great aspiration for the bliss of liberation. By that pure thought, great conscientiousness is drawn forth, and mindfulness and awareness of the individual liberation, the root of the teachings. Bestow blessings to make this the essential practice. Just as I myself have fallen into samsara's ocean, all living beings as mother are also like that. By seeing the responsibility for the liberation of beings, bestow blessings to be trained in supreme bodhicitta. However, by merely generating the mind, if not acquainted with the three aspects of ethics, enlightenment will not be attained. By seeing this excellence, bestow blessings to train with strong effort in the vows of conqueror sons. Pacifying distraction toward perverse objects, by way of proper analysis of the perfect meaning, bestow blessings to swiftly and continuously generate the path related to the union of calm abiding and special insight. Thus, becoming a vessel trained in the common paths, enter the Vajrayana, supreme evolution of all vehicles. Bestow blessings to engage the easy path itself, that sacred way of crossing for fortunate beings. The base of practice for the two aspects of attainment is when guarding the pure vows of commitment is found to be genuine and certain. Bestow blessings to protect them even at risk of life. Then, by understanding properly the important points, which are the essence of the two stages of the Tantra classes, bestow blessings to practice according to these holy teachings with continuous effort in the supreme four-session yoga. Like that, may the spiritual friend revealing the gentle path and the friends of proper practice stand firm. Bestow blessings to quickly pacify the masses of outer and inner hindrances. In all rebirths may I never be parted from perfect gurus and the enjoyment of the glorious Dharma. By utterly completing all qualities, paths and grounds, may I quickly achieve the state of Vajradhara. So today for our meditation, I thought we would meditate on the first of the four immeasurables, that is the immeasurable of love. And as we see when we go further into the teachings on the great scope, the mind of bodhicitta depends on the minds of great compassion and great love. So training in these minds of great compassion and great love is essential foundation for developing our bodhicitta. So we'll practice using the 4 aspects of immeasurable love that Geshe explains on page 153 of Path to Enlightenment. So the wish of immeasurable love, the aspiration of immeasurable love, the pure superior intention of immeasurable love, and the prayer of immeasurable love. So beginning first by sitting comfortably, ensuring that our back is relatively straight. Hands folded in the lap, right hand on the left palm with the thumb tips touching. Arms extended out slightly from the body at the elbow. Mouth, jaw and tongue relaxed. Our head slightly tilted forward. Eyes half open and half closed. Then setting the motivation for our meditation. Because our mind is a continuum. Everything we think, every feeling, thought, aspiration, emotion shapes our mind moment by moment. And so our mind will definitely be shaped by the motivation that we bring to this meditation practice. So this meditation, this teaching of the 4 immeasurables was developed with the sole thought that it benefit every other living being without exception. Whether young or old, male or female, or any other gender, human or non-human. Whether it be a being that's agreeable or a being that we find difficult. Because every living being has the same essential nature, the same wish for happiness. So we can set the aspiration that this practice is the cause that every living being without exception achieves perfect happiness quickly. Again, this is possible because our mind is a continuum. So we can develop the qualities, the insight, the skill and the compassion that will equip us to be really useful to other living beings. And we can start by visualizing or imagining all living beings surrounding us. If it's easier, in human form. Perhaps seated around us or filling space around us. Recalling that this is not mere fancy. It's actually the case. Right now, that innumerable, countless living beings, just like me, are experiencing happiness or unhappiness, pleasure or displeasure, comfort or discomfort. This is actually the case at this moment and in every moment. And while through my limited perception, at the moment I can only experience my own happiness or suffering, it's actually literally true that countless, boundless living beings right now have the same wish and aspiration for happiness that I do. Have the same aversion to any type of difficulty or suffering. So this visualization is not make-believe. It's actually keying us in to what's actually happening right now. So we can think how wonderful it would be, how good would it be if every one of these countless living beings only had happiness and the cause of happiness. So contemplating all the living beings surrounding us, recalling that includes the people who are so close to us, so dear, familiar and kind to us. People we might work with. People that we come across occasionally in our daily life. It includes some of those living beings who are currently sick or unwell, only wishing to feel better. Those who are currently experiencing hunger or thirst, mainly focused on finding food or water. How wonderful if every one of these living beings, without exception, right now, only had happiness and the cause of happiness. So just simply allow ourselves to revel in the delight of how wonderful this would be. Every living being, everywhere, only experiencing happiness, and only has the causes of future happiness. Next, we can focus on the aspiration of immeasurable love. So this is a stronger feeling. It goes beyond how wonderful it would be if every living being experienced happiness and the cause of happiness. Now we feel, may this actually be so. May this actually come to pass. May every living being, everywhere, excluding none, only have happiness and the cause of happiness. May it actually come to pass that those who are closest, most dear to us, may it actually come to pass that they have continuous happiness and the cause of happiness. And because from their side they are no different, may everyone who is a stranger to us currently, through our not knowing them, through our limitation, we are not familiar with them the way we are with those who are close to us. But we must see that from their side, they're exactly the same as the person who is dearest in the world to us. So may it actually come to pass, quickly, that every living being that is currently a stranger to me quickly achieves happiness and the cause of happiness. Also, for those beings that we may currently find difficult, living beings who may be currently harming others, through delusion, not understanding, creating the causes of future suffering. Suffering that, just like me, they would never ever want. May they also only have happiness and the cause of happiness. We can give rise to this thought also for all non-human beings. For example, animals. They could be animals that we are familiar with personally, such as our pets, or animals in the wild with nobody to care for them, defenseless, but who just look for happiness, safety, satisfaction just like us. May it come to pass that their wishes are quickly fulfilled, that they only experience happiness and all causes of happiness. Then again, bringing to mind all living beings surrounding us, we can practice the pure superior intention of immeasurable love. In the immeasurable aspiration, I wish that it may actually come to pass that every living being experiences happiness and the cause of happiness. I myself can be part of bringing this about. Step by step, I can become wiser, kinder, less self-centered, more sensitive. Step by step, I can bring more enjoyment into the lives of others by developing my generosity. Step by step, I can become better at making sure that my actions, words and thoughts don't harm others through mindfulness of non-harmfulness or ethics. Step by step, I can develop my patience really be there for others, even in the most difficult, challenging circumstances. I am fortunate because I have received the complete instructions. I've been shown all of the methods to be able to actually do this in my own life. So I myself can step by step, every day, come closer to liberation and enlightenment. Step by step, day by day, reduce my self-cherishing. So I myself will cause all living beings to experience happiness and the cause of happiness. What could be a better use of my time and my life? We can practice the prayer of immeasurable love, realizing that in our practice we are not alone. These methods have been taught, shown to us by the great teachers of the past, whose influence still guides us. They come from the Buddhas, whose all-pervasive, influencing activities pervade us at every moment. So recognizing this, we can pray. To all Buddhas, all Bodhisattvas, all holy beings. Please bless me and inspire me to practice like this. To bring all living beings to happiness. To bring them all to the cause of happiness. So we can direct our prayer to any or all of the beings who are most inspiring and meaningful to us, that we feel the closest connection with. It could be Shakyamuni Buddha, the kind founder of the lineage of teachings that we can practice in this era. Mother Tara, the liberator of all beings, who manifests in so many ways to quickly benefit others. to Manjushri, the essence of all Buddha's wisdom, whose clear and rapid wisdom instantly eliminates the root of samsara. Maitreya Buddha, the essence of all the Buddha's love, holding all sentient beings. Also, we can request, pray for help, inspiration from lineage teachers such as Lama Tsongkhapa, holy beings of our own time, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the kind and gentle Geshe Acharya Thubten Loden, our own lamas, whoever they may be. Through your power, please bless myself and all living beings. Through your power and inspiration, may I quickly develop all my good qualities, my kindness, generosity, ethics, and so forth. My great love, great compassion, bodhicitta, liberation and enlightenment. Through this, please bless me to bring all living beings, without exception, not leaving one behind, all living beings, happiness and the cause of happiness. Very quickly. And we can imagine all living beings surrounding us experience the pure, perfect happiness of enlightenment. Step by step, dissolve into light, which dissolves into our heart. And we can release our attention and complete the meditation. So, last week we began by going through the first couple of pages of chapter 18 of Path to Enlightenment, entering the Great Path. And this is the beginning of Geshe-la's explanation of the Great Scope teachings. So last week we ran through the summary that Geshe-la gives at the beginning of the chapter about the relationship of the Great Scope to the paths of small and medium scope, and the fact that the path of Great Scope brings immeasurably greater benefit than the paths of small and medium scope. But that we shouldn't misunderstand this or fall into binary type of thinking. That doesn't mean that we don't need to focus on the teachings of the small scope or medium scope, because in fact the subjects of the small and medium scope are common to all three scopes, or in other words, they also form part of the Great Scope. We can't practice the Mahayana or the Great Scope without them. And that's because, as Geshe-la explains, everything depends on motivation. So we can meditate, we can study or meditate on or practice any of the subjects within any part of the path to enlightenment, such as, for example, the subject of impermanence or karma from the small scope, the subject of the Four Noble Truths from the medium scope, and if we are practicing those with the motivation or the thought to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others, and that's the perspective that informs our practice, then it is part of the Great Scope practice, and we can't actually develop the mind of enlightenment bodhicitta unless we are familiar with and develop the realizations that are set out in those earlier parts of the path to enlightenment. So Geshe-la sums this up on page 490 simply by saying in simple terms that whether any practice is part of the Great Scope or not depends on whether or not it's motivated by the mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta. That is, the wish, the aspiration that our practice be the cause of attaining Buddhahood, of us attaining Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. And Geshe-la explains that it's this practice of bodhicitta that is not only the main practice of Mahayana Buddhism, but he also says that it's actually the essential point of the Buddha's teachings. It was the main thing that the Buddha was teaching in all of his years on this earth 2,600 years ago. So at the end of that section at the bottom of page 490, we've briefly mentioned the next 6 divisions of this chapter, where Geshe-la goes into a great deal of detail about bodhicitta. And so these begin with, firstly, with the definition of bodhicitta on page 491. So that's where we'll start off again today. So Geshe-la leads off with a very clear definition. So bodhicitta can be defined as a primary mind wishing to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others. So if we have bodhicitta, we have the wish to attain enlightenment, and we have that wish, or we aspire to attain enlightenment for the reason that we wish to be able to benefit others. Geshe-la explains that therefore bodhicitta has 2 distinct aspirations. Firstly, we aspire to enlightenment, and secondly, we aspire to the outcome that we can bring about by attaining enlightenment, namely to lead every other living being out of suffering, or to the cessation of suffering. And I guess he doesn't use these words here, but he would often say in his verbal teachings that of these 2, the first aspiration, that is the aspiration to attain enlightenment, that's the branch aspiration or the secondary aspiration. And it's the second aspiration, the aspiration to benefit all living beings by leading them out of suffering, that's the primary aspiration or the root aspiration of bodhicitta. So there's then a quote from Maitreya from his Ornament for Clear Realization, which again elucidates this point. So in this beautiful, simple verse, so if we ask ourselves, what does bodhicitta mean? The answer from Maitreya is bodhicitta means for the sake of others, wishing to attain complete, perfect enlightenment. So that encapsulates it really beautifully. And I really enjoyed the way Nick used that as a basis for meditation in some of the sessions. So it's almost, we can reflect on that verse repeatedly, a bit as if it was like a mantra. So if we're not clear what bodhicitta means, then a way to bring it simply to heart is simply to reflect on that very clear statement. Bodhicitta means for the sake of others, wishing to attain complete, perfect enlightenment. So we might think, well, so suppose I really wish to benefit others. Suppose I see the logic of that. It appeals to me in terms of the way I feel about things. If I really want to benefit others, I want to devote my life to that. How would I actually go about doing it? So, for example, we might think one way to benefit others would be to amass a lot of money. So in fact, people might have heard of the philosophy of effective altruism, and effectively that's the basis of that. The thought, well, if I go off, that's one aspect of it. One of the things really useful things that I could do in my life is to go off and become a hedge fund manager, for example, and then make a humongous amount of wealth, and then with that wealth, I can then really, really benefit others. Or we might think, I can go into politics. So if I get a really high office, so if I become the President of the United States, for example, if I was an American person, well then potentially I can bring immense benefit to tens of millions of people. Or we might think that we could go into business, because in the Western world in particular, business is so strong and powerful and is so influential. So if I became a really powerful person in the commercial world, then that might also mean that I could actually bring enormous benefit to others. From a Buddhist perspective, though, if we analyse, firstly, that reasoning isn't faulty. So firstly, any of those things, if we did it with proper motivation, could definitely bring great benefit to other living beings. And we can see examples, for example, of Bill Gates, of people who are actually bringing great benefit to living beings right now through this sort of approach. From a Buddhist perspective, though, if we analyse, we can see that this sort of approach could only ever bring temporary benefit. None of these approaches will solve the problem of psychic existence. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at psychic existence, at the fact that our minds individually are bound by delusion and karma. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at that problem, it won't fix it. It doesn't matter how renewable our energy is. We must have the most fantastic renewable energy system, move to a completely green economy. That won't solve the problem of psychic existence. We might have a perfectly effective tax system. We might have a completely state-of-the-art public health system. We might have a completely efficient defence force. We might have an extraordinary, ethical, competent, efficient, productive business sector. None of those things, even if they're taken to their complete pinnacle, can solve the problem of psychic existence. So that doesn't mean that these activities have no value whatsoever. Again, we don't need to get into binary type of thinking. They can be useful if done with good motivation, but the only thing can ultimately benefit others, can benefit them in an ultimate, reliable way that solves their problems continuously and forever, is to get them out of psychic existence. And because we can't directly extract other living beings from psychic existence, just as Buddhas can't immediately remove us from psychic existence, so we need to develop the methods that are going to assist living beings to find their own way of psychic existence. We can develop our own capabilities so that we can provide the utmost, the perfect, the optimal support, guidance, resources, inspiration for others to practice, just as we, in our own practice, are supported, guided and inspired by our teachers, by the great enlightened beings of past, present and future. And we not only do we need limitless compassion, love, energy, resilience in order to be able to really benefit other living beings. Not only do we need to develop those capabilities, we also need to cultivate our wisdom so that our wisdom is completely perfected, especially the wisdom that knows precisely and exactly what every other living being needs from us at any particular time. So this wisdom, this special wisdom, is what is characteristic of enlightenment. To really benefit others, we need enlightenment. And so bodhicitta means the aspiration to attain that very state, that capability, but solely with the objective of benefiting every other living being, excluding none. And this isn't a one-off motivation. Once we have bodhicitta, it's something that animates every activity of our life, all of our actions of generosity, our actions, any conduct of patience that we engage in, any meditation, any practice that we might do, and not just formal meditation practice or Dharma practice. Every activity in our life becomes motivated by this wish. Just as, at the moment, every activity in our life is mainly motivated by the thought of increasing our pleasure, reducing our pain. Once we have bodhicitta, that motivation is flipped around. What is driving us, animating us, is solely how can I benefit others more and more. Geshe explains the meaning of the Sanskrit word bodhicitta. So it consists of two separate words, or it's a composite word. The word bodhi in Sanskrit meaning enlightenment, and the word citta meaning mind. And so the etymology of bodhicitta, or the best, most simple translation of it is the mind of enlightenment, although there are various other translations of it around, or ways of describing it around. So the next section then is Geshe's explanation of the benefits of practicing bodhicitta, and this begins on page 492. So there are 10 of these, and Geshe leads off by saying, well, actually, the benefits of bodhicitta are beyond quantification. Again, this isn't, sometimes we can get into thinking that these are just extravagant statements or that they're Buddhist spin, but actually it's literally true. That there's no way of quantifying, from a Buddhist perspective, the benefits of bodhicitta. There's no way that we can actually conceive of, that we can mentally engage with, how beneficial really generating and realising the mind of bodhicitta can be. We'll only know that by actually generating it ourselves. But these 10 points give us a way of gradually building an understanding of it. And as Geshe points out right at the end of this section, of this explanation of the 10 benefits of bodhicitta, one of the reasons for doing this is to inspire us. If we really understand what it would be like to generate bodhicitta within our own continuum, how would our life be different? How would it affect our activities? How would it affect the way we see others? How would it affect that we interact with others? How would our life be different if we actually realised bodhicitta? If we develop that realisation, which is the point of understanding these 10, well then that's a really powerful motivator to actually develop it within our lives. And as with everything in the path to enlightenment, these are excellent objects of meditation. So we could do a meditation on any one of these 10 benefits. We could do a briefer meditation on all 10 of them or 5 of them, but really, really useful to become familiar with them, firstly by reading them, by thinking about them, by applying them to our own life, and then by doing meditation on them. So really, really useful. So the first of these 10 is that by generating bodhicitta, we enter the only gateway to the Mahayana. So a couple of things about this. Firstly, it's interesting that of these 10, Geshe-la's commentary on this one is by far the longest of any of the 10, which suggests, and particularly because what Geshe-la does in this section is that he makes very similar points repeatedly by using different examples, different historical teachers who have talked about them, but reinforcing them over and over again. And in particular, the main theme that Geshe-la is emphasising here is that for our Dharma practice to be effective, bodhicitta has to be the essence of our practice. If we wish to practice Dharma, it's not so much about what specific practice we are doing. It's not about how sophisticated that practice is, how intellectually intriguing it is, how interesting it is, how subtle a practice is, and especially, as we'll see, Geshe-la makes these points with regard to the practice of Tantra. All of the 84,000 dharmas that the Buddha taught, any of them is enormously valuable, and the great benefit that we have is that we have this wonderful wealth of teachings within which we can select the ones that are most suitable to us, that speak to us at any particular time, at a particular point in our life. But of any of these teachings, none of them will be of complete benefit unless they are accompanied by and motivated by bodhicitta. And the reason for that is that without bodhicitta, any practice cannot be part of the Mahayana, which means that it cannot be as useful as it potentially could be, because it cannot produce the Mahayana result of enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings. So Geshe-la leads off with a simple statement of this at the beginning of the first paragraph of the explanation on page 492. So he says that a practice only becomes Mahayana if motivated by bodhicitta. If we don't have bodhicitta, even if we engage in practices that involve the realisation of deepest ultimate truth, perfect understanding of conventional truth, that can only bring the realisation of an arhat or foe destroyer. It cannot bring the realisation of enlightenment. Even if we practice the very highest tantras, we gain extraordinary miracle powers. If we don't have bodhicitta, we're not practicing the Mahayana. And whatever practice we are doing, whatever powers we might develop, it can't produce the result and benefit of Mahayana practice. It can't actually be of benefit to numberless living beings without exception. So Geshe-la then goes through in more detail about the importance of this key motivation, of really paying serious attention to developing our motivation. So first Geshe-la talks about Lama Tsongkhapa and his observations that there are many people who overtly might appear to be practicing the Mahayana, that is, they might be using methods that are taught in the Mahayana, but who aren't actually practicing the Mahayana because they don't have bodhicitta, or they're not putting effort into developing bodhicitta. And that's so even if they're practicing very high and subtle Mahayana methods, such as the methods shown in Tantra. So Geshe, again, he goes into quite a bit of detail here, and to do this, he gives a bit of an explanation of how the practice of Tantra or Vajrayana works. So he does this in the next couple of pages, and this supplements the high-level explanation of the Vajrayana that Geshe gives right at the end of the Path to Enlightenment in chapter 32, bearing in mind that the Vajrayana actually forms part of the Path to Enlightenment as well. So, this explanation begins in the middle of page 493, where Geshe says that the Mahayana is divided into two vehicles. So, firstly, there's the perfection vehicle and the Vajra, and the Vajra vehicle. The perfection vehicle is also sometimes known as, or in Sanskrit, the word perfection vehicle, the Sanskrit word for that is paramitayana, paramita referring to the practice of the perfections, specifically the 6 perfections. And by following the perfection vehicle, we achieve an accumulation of merit and wisdom over a period of 3 countless great eons, and that accumulation of merit and wisdom ultimately transforms into a Buddha's form body and a Buddha's nature body. So the perfection vehicle includes the practice of the 6 perfections, perfection of generosity, ethics, and so forth, and this is the sutra path. So this is really what the rest of the text is explaining up to chapter 31. Secondly, there is the Vajrayana, or the Vajra vehicle, which is also described as the secret vehicle, and Geshe explains that this is a rapid path that enables us to very quickly accumulate the merit and wisdom that we need to attain enlightenment. It's important to understand that these two aren't contradictory, that in fact we only practice the Vajrayana on top of the perfection vehicle. Any bodhisattva practices the perfection vehicle. If they're also a Tantra practitioner, then they add the practice of Tantra to that. Geshe explains that the Vajrayana has 4 levels. The most sophisticated of those 4 levels is known as Maha Anuttara Yoga Tantra, or in English, highest Yoga Tantra. And he also explains that there are many, many different highest Yoga Tantra practices, and he's giving this in order to set up the example that I'll come to in a moment. And that within highest Yoga Tantra, one of the most subtle methods, sometimes referred to as the king of tantras or the peak of tantras, is the Guhya Samaja Tantra, which is one of the most subtle and sophisticated tantra practices of all. So Geshe is using this to reinforce really that it's not so much, that it's really secondary about what it is we're practicing. What is important is the motivation that we are practicing with, and it's only if we have the motivation of bodhicitta that we've actually entered the Mahayana and that we're able to produce the results of the Mahayana. So he gives the example of 4 people who are doing a Guhya Samaja retreat, bearing in mind that Guhya Samaja, peak of the Tantras, extraordinary, subtle, profound, deep and pure practice taught by Shakyamuni Buddha in the form of Vajradhara. And we can do a thought experiment and think of 4 people doing it with 4 different motivations. So the first person thinks this practice is so powerful, so profound, creates so much merit. Through this, I'll have the basis for having a very long lifespan, and it will support wonderful good health, good conditions, and so forth. So in this case, although Guhya Samaja is a Mahayana practice, that person is actually not practicing the Mahayana at all. In fact, they're not even practicing Dharma, because their objective in doing the practice is simply to achieve benefits in this life. The second person doing the retreat thinks that by doing this practice, then I will avoid the worst results in samsara. or psychic existence. I'll avoid rebirth in the lower realms. I'll close the door to the lower realms because of the merit and positive karma, the purification that I experience as a result of doing this retreat. Again, Geshe says, well, this is a Mahayana practice, but that person is actually only doing a smaller scope retreat, and that retreat can only produce the result of a small scope practice. It cannot produce the result of benefit to all living beings. The third person thinks, due to this practice, I will achieve the cessation of suffering. So I'm studying the Four Noble Truths, I understand the Four Noble Truths, I want to remove my own suffering. This practice will be the cause of that result. Again, this practice cannot produce, even though derived from Mahayana methods, is not a Mahayana practice and cannot produce the full potential result of highest Yoga Tantra. It can produce the extraordinary, wonderful, positive result of nirvana or liberation. It cannot produce the result of enlightenment for the benefit of every living being without exception. The fourth person is motivated by the thought, due to this practice, I will attain enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings. And it's only the person who is doing the practice with that motivation who is actually creating the cause of enlightenment, who is actually creating the cause of being able to benefit every living being without exception. Geshe goes on to explain that, well, if you practice highest Yoga Tantra, then on the very best case scenario, it's possible for a highest Yoga Tantra practitioner to attain enlightenment within an incredibly short period. So it can be within 3 or 12 years, for example, if all of the circumstances right up, their karma's appropriate and so forth. But that again is only the case, can only be the case if the practitioner has bodhicitta motivation. And there are in fact examples of practitioners who achieved enlightenment in this way, such as Milarepa and Jetsun Tsongkhapa, but again, only possible through their bodhicitta motivation. Without bodhicitta motivation, completely impossible. Geshe used to say, talk about something being a sky painting. So as if you were trying to paint an object in the sky. Completely impossible to achieve enlightenment if we aren't practicing bodhicitta. Doesn't matter how sophisticated the practice we're doing. Doesn't matter how many high empowerments we take. It doesn't matter if we go up into the Himalayas and find some extraordinary Lama who's been practicing, doing a particular practice their whole lifetime, incredibly pure. We receive empowerment from them. Doesn't matter. If we don't develop bodhicitta, then the practice cannot be a cause of enlightenment. On the other side of the ledger, if we do have bodhicitta, then even the most elementary or simple practice can be the cause of enlightenment and bringing ultimate benefit to innumerable living beings. Geshe says that even if we give a single flower to one living being, but it's genuinely based on bodhicitta, it's genuinely motivated by that thought, then the merit of that is greater than if we were to give all of our wealth, all of the wealth that there is in the world to every living being in existence, but without bodhicitta motivation, just doing it from an ordinary motivation. So Geshe then goes into a little bit more detail about highest Yoga Tantra practice to make this point. Again, as I say, he's really, really driving this point home because he explains it in so many different ways. So highest Yoga Tantra is generally divided into 2 stages, 2 different types of practice. The first is called generation stage, the second is called completion stage. When the yogi is practicing generation stage, that involves practices that emphasize meditation on generating oneself in a divine or enlightened form or aspects. So we could think about this from the point of view of recognizing the divine aspect, the Buddha potential within ourselves, and making that real, realizing that within our continuum by actively imagining it or generating it. In the completion stage, following that, then we emphasize meditations that involve working with our subtle body or our subtle energies and the various chakras and so forth. These are incredibly profound practices, very subtle practices, very, very powerful practices. Now again, Geshe makes the point that if we don't take the bodhicitta vows and we aren't engaging in these practices based on the motivation of bodhicitta, then we're not actually even able to receive empowerment. So if we go along and receive initiation from an incredibly experienced, powerful, profound Lama without bodhicitta motivation, we're not even actually going to receive the empowerment in any real way. Much less are we going to be able to really engage in these practices of highest yoga tantra. And doing these meditations, if we're not sincerely practicing bodhicitta, is just really play acting. It's not actually producing a positive result. Geshe talks about an example of one High Lama called Purchuk Ngawang Jampa, and the fact that he was a very high tantric Lama, but he would place a lot of emphasis on the path to enlightenment practice, especially bodhicitta, before he would give a tantric empowerment. So in fact, whenever you receive a highest yoga tantra empowerment, one of the things that the Lama will do in giving the base of the initiation is to give a discourse on path to enlightenment, and especially on motivation, since one takes the bodhicitta vows. This Lama was particularly renowned for giving so much emphasis to bodhicitta and path to enlightenment that some people suggested, well, maybe this guy doesn't actually understand Tantra properly and he's spending all this time on teaching bodhicitta in order to cover up the fact that he doesn't really understand the Vajrayana. In fact, Geshe says, because he was the highest and most accomplished of Tantric Lamas, he knew that unless the students practice bodhicitta, then taking the initiation in the Vajrayana would be a pointless activity. Geshe also talks about Atisha, who first introduced the graduated path or Lamrim style of practice to Tibet. The fact that in all of his years in teaching in Tibet, he mainly emphasised path to enlightenment, bodhicitta. He would only occasionally give tantric empowerments. In his own life, he showed the importance of bodhicitta by travelling from India to Sumatra to receive bodhicitta teachings from the great master Salingpa, and he did that on the advice of Tara that he received at Bodh Gaya. Geshe says that Atisha didn't enjoy it very much when people talked to him about all of the high initiations that they'd had, all of the special deity practices that they did, because he knew that unless people were doing that on the basis of bodhicitta, that they were missing the point. And so really what they were doing wasn't so important. Any practice of the perfection vehicle or the Vajra vehicle is ultimately just a means to an end, and that is the end or the objective of benefiting all living beings based on the motivation of bodhicitta. Geshe makes the point that in fact without bodhicitta the practice of Tantra can even potentially be dangerous or harmful to our practice. So we talked about the generation stage practices of visualising oneself in an enlightened aspect. If we do this without bodhicitta and with confusion, then we can merely strengthen our own pride, our own ego and confusion if we don't understand it within the framework of bodhicitta. If we develop ordinary pride, ordinary ego, instead of what's referred to as Vajra pride, or understanding our pure enlightened nature, our pure potential, then what the practice is actually doing is tying us more firmly into psychic existence rather than being a cause of liberating ourselves from psychic existence. This doesn't mean that we need the actual direct realisation of bodhicitta in order to practice Tantra or to engage in any practice of the great scope, because the actual realisation of bodhicitta takes itself some time and effort to develop. But it does mean that for these practices to be effective, we need to be putting in a genuine effort to develop bodhicitta by, for example, listening, thinking, meditating on the teachings of bodhicitta as they're explained in Path to Enlightenment, continuously reviewing and improving our motivation. So Geshe then also quotes Shantideva on page 498, where Shantideva talks about why it is that we practice bodhicitta, because the Buddhas themselves, having contemplated intensely, having asked themselves the question, as an enlightened being, what is it that is most beneficial in order for living beings to practice, to rescue themselves, to extricate themselves from samsara? And the one thing that is the most beneficial is generating this mind of bodhicitta. So having contemplated intensely for many eons, the Buddhas have seen it to be beneficial because it enables limitless masses of beings to instantly attain the supreme state of bliss. Geshe also makes the point that although the wisdom perceiving emptiness is the actual thing that brings about the cessation of suffering, it's the actual thing that brings about the end of our experience of psychic existence, the end of every living being's experience of psychic existence. It's the thing that removes our suffering. It isn't this wisdom of perceiving emptiness that makes the Mahayana special. Or it isn't this practice, it isn't this wisdom of perceiving emptiness that is of the greatest benefit of all. So, for example, foe destroyers who are practicing the practices of medium scope also develop this wisdom completely, the same completely pure, accurate wisdom, perceiving the emptiness of self and phenomena. They are completely liberated from the slightest fault, from the slightest delusion, the slightest confusion, the slightest negativity. They are only embody positivity. But this realisation itself isn't the most beneficial and isn't in itself the distinguishing feature of the Mahayana. It's only the motivation to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings that actually brings about the fruit of Mahayana practice, that can actually bring the result of benefit to all innumerable living beings. With bodhicitta, Geshe makes the point that any of our activities whatsoever, however mundane, however trivial they might seem, any activity, if we do it with mindfulness of bodhicitta, can be a cause of enlightenment. So it has this tremendous transformative power. Anything that we do becomes meaningful, powerful, effective and beneficial the more we cultivate bodhicitta. Whether we're eating, whether we're having a shower, even if we're sleeping, if we're working, we're studying, we're taking a walk, we're watching television, anything that we do, if we maintain mindfulness of our bodhicitta motivation, continuously get into the habit of bringing it to mind, any of those activities can be a cause of enlightenment and hence a cause of benefit to the beings that we currently care about, to all of the beings everywhere that if we knew better we would care about. Geshe finishes this section by again pointing out that some yogis, some practitioners are absolutely fascinated by the idea of developing miracle powers. So, for example, there's a practice that Geshe refers to here of some yogis doing a stone essence diet, where it's a great ascetic practice where literally they sustain themselves by living on the essence of stone, of powdered rocks. Geshe makes the point that if yogis do this practice without bodhicitta, that the only result they're going to produce is concrete feces. They're not going to be able to bring about a result that is really beneficial to others. In other words, it's a waste of time. He makes the point that some yogis aspire to gain the miraculous power of flight. But again, he makes the point, well, being able to fly in itself isn't that special. Every bird is able to fly. What is special is being able to benefit every other living being without exception, and it's only the Mahayana motivation of bodhicitta that will bring about that result. So Geshe brings it all together in the final sentence. So above all, make bodhicitta your main practice. So that's taken up all of the time today. So I'm kind of sorry, not sorry, because I really felt, again, because Geshe goes into such detail, he makes the same point repeatedly, that I think that's a signal, at least to me, that
But it's really important to engage with it, think it through. So we'll finish off with dedication prayers. And we'll do the final prayer of the graduated path just in English today. By the two collections vast as space, amassed with effort for a long time, may I become a chief of conquerors, a guide for all beings whose mind's eye is blinded by ignorance. Also in all lives will not yet come to that, may Manjushri favour me with his compassion. Finding the supreme path, complete with all stages of the teachings, may I please the conquerors by practising well. By my precise understanding of the essential points of the path, with skillful means drawn along by strong compassion, and by dispelling the mental darkness of beings, may I uphold the conqueror's teaching for a long time. Where the supreme precious teaching has not spread, also where it has spread but become degenerate, with a mind deeply moved by great compassion, may I make clear this treasure of benefit and bliss. The stages of the path, excellently established by the marvellous deeds of the conquerors and their sons, give glory to the minds of those aspiring for liberation. May the conquerors' deeds be long preserved. May all humans and non-humans remove the obstructions and establish conditions favourable to cultivating the excellent path, never be parted for all of their lifetimes from the purest of paths which the Buddhas have praised. When someone makes effort to practice properly the 10 points of conduct of the Supreme Vehicle, may he always be assisted by the mighty protectors, and may oceans of good fortune spread out, reaching all. And then the general dedication. Gewandi Chebokun Sonam Yeshe Zog Zog Jin Sonam Yeshe Le Jong We Damba Kunyi Topa Shog. By this virtue may all beings complete the collections of wisdom and merit and attain the two holy bodies arisen from wisdom and merit. Jangju Sem Chogrim Boche Ma Che Panam Che Jo Che Che Pa Nyamba Me Pa Ye Gong Ne Gong Du Shog. May the precious superior mind of enlightenment be generated in those who have not yet generated it, not decrease in those who have developed it, but increase continuously. Okay, thank you everybody. Special thanks, Manikam. Hope everybody has a great week. Hopefully Nick will be in brilliant good health and we'll be back with you next week, and see you later.